welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
This is Jessica with Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast, and I am here with the author of by far one of my favorite books of the summer. I definitely judged this book by the cover. When I saw it, I'm like, oh, that's really beautiful. And then I had to read it, and I read it, and it's got a blurb by Carolyn Kepnes, of the You series, which is a pretty good blurb because she's a pretty great writer. So I'm not going to talk anymore about you. I'm going to let you introduce yourself and talk about Kismet.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amina Akhtar. I'm the author of Kismet, which has just come out recently. And it's a very fun, murdery, crazy look at the wellness world of Sedona.
Do you live in Sedona?
I live about 20 miles away. So I moved out there from New York. I'm a former New Yorker, to be with my dad because my mom had passed, and my dad, he's almost 90 and he was by himself. So I was like, all right, packed up my dog, my books, and headed out there. And I thought it would be for 6 months, and it's been almost 6 years. And yeah, you can see the red rocks from our house. It's beautiful, different but beautiful.
I would like to one day go out there. And it's funny because right when I finished this book, I was talking to a friend of mine about, I forget exactly how we got into the conversation, and she started telling me about Sedona and how new agey it is. And I said, yeah, I just read a book where that new agey thing was a little bit more dystopian than or not even dystopian, just more not as hippy dippy happy, patchouli as you're describing it. And really what I like about this book is it's so good because you have so much going on in it. So it's the story of Ronnie, who she also lost her mother when she was a child, and she was raised by her aunt, who was just
horrible.
And it's almost like what we'd say is a Cinderella story.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she looked at Ronnie and was just like, well, now I have a servant now that I'm in care of this child. And it was just horrible. So Ronnie really wants to come out of this, and she finds Marley, who is kind of like a life coach, but Marley has her eyes set on being some big influencer because
she wants to be Gwyneth Paltrow basically and have the next scoop. Yeah, for sure. She's not really about helping people. She wants the fame, she wants the followers.
Yes, exactly. And Ronnie really needs to she needs a lot of soul medicine, for lack of a better phrase.
She needs to empower herself.
She does. Yes.
She's when I was writing Ronnie, I was like, I call her sad Ronnie. She's a bit of a doormat at the beginning. I kind of took a lot of, in Desi culture, there's a lot of put the kids to work a little bit. It's changed, obviously, but when I was little, this is what it was. And we definitely have the aunties who are, they're cruel in their love. Let's put it that way. They love you, but they're not I definitely have an aunt who will poke my stomach and be like, you need to lose weight, and that's the greeting you get, and you're just like, oh my God. So I wanted the aunt to be reflective of that. And also it was like, how do I make this person, Ronnie, so beat down that she would glom on to a would-be guru? So I was trying to figure out her backstory that would make somebody want to do that.
Right. So, okay. So there's a lot going on in this book that I love. And so you're talking about so there were aunties that, they were talking behind her back and, but the auntie who brought her up seemed cruel in her cruelty. I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like the disclaimer is my aunts are lovely, nice people, But I definitely, when you're growing up, it was like, what if the aunties say this about you? And they say XYZ, or they gossip about you, and then you get in trouble, even if you've done nothing wrong. So it was definitely a thing to keep them happy and have them like you. So really, but I took it to like the nth degree with Ronnie's aunt,
Oh
and
yeah,
her
no,
friends.
that was, and like, because I was reading it at first, and I'm like, does it get any better? Like, is there like love in here? It's like,
Well,
yeah,
there's self-love. I feel like
yeah,
Ronnie's journey, she ends up
yes,
figuring out who she is separate from people. And I think that is key for her. But she has
yeah.
to go on a wild ride to get there.
So Marley, as we were saying, she is your, white girl, new agey, uh,
Crystals, crystals,
crystals, crystals,
crystals.
crystals, buy more crystals.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yep. Buy
not,
your way into wellness.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's like, you get there and you start like the ravens are talking, and that's like a whole other part to this story, is the wildlife has a voice, and you're not quite sure who they're talking about exactly at a certain time. You get to figure it out. You feel like Ronnie is tuned in more than
Mm-hmm.
the people who claim that they know all about wellness
Yeah.
and healing,
Well,
which
when I
is
moved
crazy.
out
Yeah.
there, I moved from New York, where I was an editor for 20 years. So I'm out and I see wildlife more than humans. We've got these huge ravens that are larger than my dog, and they're all over the place. They're beautiful. We've got coyotes and javelinas and bobcats, and
Okay,
it's
tell me about javelinas, because they come up in your story, and I do follow you on social media,
so
and I
you've
saw
seen
you
them.
said, what is a javelina?
It is related to a pig, but it is not quite a pig. Imagine really mean, kind of like a wild boar that basically only lives in Arizona, and they will attack you and they will try to kill your dog. They're not pleasant animals. So every day I always joke that my yard is like the animal expressway, because they literally, every animal throughout the day just walks right across it. And you can see them from the windows. I've been surprised by javelinas with my dog out before, and that's always a fun moment to run away as fast as you can. But I had never even heard of them until I moved out there, and then I'm like, what is that? Why is there this pig animal out there? They're scary, and they have these tusks, and they're kind of blind, and oh my god.
That's what
Yes.
is it, 30 to 50 feral hogs?
30 to 50 feral hogs. I'm that person. I got the 30 to 50 wild cavalitas. So,
Yeah.
being in this wild place, and one of the reasons people go out to Sedona and to Arizona in general, is because the wildlife and nature is just so beautiful. So I wanted, and also living there, I felt like you're more cognizant of how human activity can affect the animals, and like new houses are going up, the animals are losing their land and places to live in their habitats. So I wanted really to give them that voice. And so I was walking on my driveway one day, and I was trying to figure out, how am I going to do that? How do I besides saying, oh, look at the animals, how am I supposed to do this? And one of the ravens dropped a huge feather at my feet, and I was like, okay, I'm going to take this as a sign. I maybe took it as a literal sign and literally put it in the book. And that's how the ravens came to be. I was like, I'm going to give them, they can be my Greek chorus, where they can be like, this is terrible. Look what the humans are doing. We need someone to help us. And that's how the ravens came.
They're awesome. There's so much in this book that just really was so effective, and it was creepy, and it was suspenseful. So yeah, Ronnie moves out to Sedona with Marley in search of empowerment and healing, but immediately Marley just wants to find the cool crowd so she
Yeah,
can,
and
yeah,
Ronnie ends up becoming almost the same servant role she
yeah,
had with her aunt.
yeah.
So basically, Marley becomes the new aunt, and they're out hiking at the beginning of the book, and they stumble over a dead body, or body parts. It's not the full body. And that's when you realize, all is not right in Wellness Town, and we come to find out somebody's murdering the healer, not really the healers, but the people who are scamming people and pretending to be healers, and they're being killed off, and we have to figure out who it is.
So that's a good question, though, like with the whole idea of, healers. And I know that this is a whole industry.
Billion-dollar industry.
The people the scammers, do they actually believe that they're healing people?
I think not. I think, look, I believe, are there people who are legitimately into it for healing? Yes, absolutely. I didn't want them to be the ones who are getting killed, because you know what? That's cool. Do your thing. I wanted it to be the people who are after money, after fame, not in it to help people. Just want to see the next mark, and let's see what we can get out of them. That type of person.
I mean, that's really just nuts. And you do see it everywhere. And it's actually it's funny in a way, but not really funny. I read a book last year called Cultish, which talks about the language of fanaticism, and there are people who claim to be helpful who I've never even heard of, and now I'm like horrified that I know that they exist. Like, I was happier knowing, not knowing that certain people exist, and I'm not going to say their names because I don't want any of their followers to
the blowback,
yell at me. But let's just say there are, it's a really nutty industry. And what I think, though, is you do have, as you mentioned, so Ronnie is she's Muslim, and she's brown in this town that's very white and new agey, and she has, she's very tuned in ways that I think a lot of these quote unquote healers wish that they were. But there's so much like fetishizing about who she is just because they look at her automatically. Like, I think at one point, like, she's hurt and people just assume she's like being beaten or something. Like, wow.
I have to say, living in that area, so my family is from Pakistan, also Muslim, and we're, first of all, one of the few brown people ever I see. Like, there's rarely, and which it's Arizona, so you're thinking it's going to be diverse, not in this area. And people I meet are really into India. They love it. And then the second you say you're from Pakistan and that you're Muslim, they're like, oh.
That's not what they're looking for.
But at the same time, they'll have like wellness accounts on Twitter or it's on Instagram that's all about Rumi, and then you point out, well, Rumi's Muslim and he's writing about God, and they're like, no, he's not. You're like, no, really, please Google who he is. So it's not just a Sedona thing. That I feel like is wellness across the board, because like coming from the fashion industry, I met so many wellness people before I even moved out there that were like this. So it's more of it's a broader wellness thing as opposed to this just happens in Sedona. It's all over that.
Without a doubt. I mean, I was a teenager in the 90s. And there were so you go around to some of these and I have to say off the bat, like, crystal shops are kind of a guilty pleasure for me. I have such a hard time not going into them.
Look, I love shiny things. A shiny rock. I don't care if it's a diamond or a quartz. I like them. Do I think that they imbue my life with any kind of extra special force? No, but I think they're pretty.
Sure.
And if they make you happy, great.
But
I feel like we've come to the point in wellness where it's, oh, buy this one more thing. You need to buy one more thing to be well. Buy this thing and this thing, as opposed to actually healing yourself and your traumas.
And one thing that, really now I kind of look back on it and I'm like, ouch. And I think it's still there is, I remember very distinctly going into some of these shops near my house, a few towns away. And there was a big fetishism of Native Americans.
Yes.
And, just all of these images of these, Native Americans,
the headdress
in light, and like nobody who worked in the store was Native American or knew anything really.
I always say that this book could have been told by an Indigenous author. because instead of having South Asian fetishization, it would have been indigenous, because it's very similar. It's you know, well, that's not my point of view. Like I couldn't write that story. I wanted to write from ours, but like, you know, the fact that people are using sage so much, that sage is becoming endangered and harder for people to buy when it's their own spiritual rights. So I think that there's a lot that we as consumers have to look at, and what our impact is on the cultures that we're borrowing from.
Yes. And you know, like, so Ronnie does find a bit of refuge with Britt and Star, who are the twins who run a big crystal shop, and it's like everybody kind of wants to get in good with them, especially Marley. And they, you know, they're still problematic. That's very important to mention. They do take
They're
Ronnie
like,
in.
we're shamans, we're mixed back in the way, you know, the way people are always like, oh yeah, I definitely am part native by 1/100%, you know, and you're just
right.
oh, okay. I actually based them. I met a shaman named Brittany. She was a friend of a friend, and she came to my house. We were all hanging out, and just nice person, whatever. I hadn't met people in Sedona yet, so it was fine. You know, I needed friends. And she starts talking about how Trump made the chemtrails go away. And I didn't know what to do about that. I was like, oh, okay. I don't think we're gonna be friends, because that's, yeah. So it's very like, the area is very new agey, crystals, but we love Trump and have guns and don't necessarily want brown people. So it's a very peculiar world in that way.
I mean, I got that from the book, and I just, like, you know, really, there's just, I know we're talking a lot about the shysters, and you know, just the culture of the quote unquote healing culture and wellness culture. But what I have to say is this book is so suspenseful, and there's so much that you are digging to find out. You know, there's layers upon layers of Ronnie's story. You know, like, there's a lot of cringe moments where people in the town interact with Ronnie, and you know,
I love cringe moments too.
But you know, like, Britt and Star, they try.
They're very well intentioned.
Yes. But they don't, like, the whole picture, you know, we don't even know the whole picture. And honestly, there's other things going on in their past that Ronnie doesn't know. And with this serial killer that seems to be killing the influencers and the shysters, whatever you call them, everything just kind of comes on this collision course, and you're not really sure where it's going to end. But
until the end.
It's such a good book. It is so good. And I think, whether, you know, I love that Ronnie is you know, introducing you know, Desi culture in this way, and putting it side by side against this other, which really is, you know, a lot of appropriation, and also a lot of,
it's sort of like, my sister was telling me how one of her white neighbors was explaining henna to her, and she was like, you do know that that's we do that. Okay, yeah, okay. So there's always been these moments where people,
Madonna
like,
didn't invent henna in the
Gwen Stefani.
Gwen Stefani. Talk about people whose music I really do enjoy, but
look, I love her back,
and I'm just
listen,
like,
take the bindi off, lady.
So much cringe.
It's very cringy. And also, like, in the 90s and the 2000s, appropriation was rampant. It was just a thing, you know, you just had it. So all the things that we used to get made fun of at school was now chic and cool, and it was like, oh, this is uncomfortable and weird. Like, you don't even know how to react to that, to be honest. So I do think that where we are now as a society, talking about appropriation is so much better than we used to be, because at least we're cognizant of it, or at least we're, you know, being like, hey, this happens.
No, I think so. And it's one of those things, again, that sort of comes with learning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Learning, talking
yeah.
to other people, different cultures, and embracing them without trying to be them.
Yeah.
Or pull parts of them, into our own lives.
Right. Yeah. So really, again, this book was great. I just loved it. This is your first? This is your
No, it's my
debut?
second. It's
This
my
is your
second.
second.
My debut was hashtag fashion victim, which was set in the fashion industry, and it's basically Devil Wears Prada meets American Psycho. So I basically wanted to write a book where a fashion editor is just, and this is not a spoiler, like right away she's a killer, that she's a serial killer, and you're in her head, it's her point of view, and she's just murdering people who get in her way, and it's ridiculous and campy and over the top and hilarious.
Well, now I have to read that. So are you writing something now?
Yeah, so my next book is diving into the folklore and superstition of my family. So my father's family is Sufi, and we have a lot of jinn stories. I always feel like as jinn, Jinn, not Gin, the alcohol.
Right. My mouth just opened in glee.
Yeah.
So when we release these, but like I made a very happy jaw drop when you said that.
Yeah. So my dad is always he grew up with jinn in his house, he says, and so I don't know people, like I find that every Pakistani person I know believes in jinn. I believe in them. I think they're real. You grow up, those were my lullabies, instead of being told something cute and sweet, I was told about jinn. So I wanted to have this story of this woman it's going to be in New York, whose life is sort of falling apart. She's getting attacked, her mom has died, she got dumped by her fiance, all these things are happening, and she's this very assimilated, very pro-science, anti-religion, no spirituality type of person, and you start to wonder, is she being haunted? Is this what's happening to her? And so it's told in different timelines. It's told as things are happening to her. It's told from when she's 5 years old and her mother had her exorcised because her mother thought she was possessed, and a true crime podcast 2 years later after she's disappeared, as we try to figure out what's happened to her. So it's interesting. I hope people like it. It's definitely going to be less of a satire and more of a what is happening kind of book.
Like those books.
Yeah.
So when do you think we might be able to read that?
I think it's tentatively slated for next May. So I that can change obviously because publishing schedules, but like I'm working on the second round of edits now with my editor, so it's going to be turned in and done by September. So
super, I can't wait to read it.
And then I can take a nap and do nothing but read for the rest of the year.
That's good.
Yeah, and then maybe next year start writing another one, but I need a little break in between.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for writing Kismet. I have to go back now and read your first book.
I love that.
Oh my gosh. And I can't wait to read the next one.
Thank you. Yeah, The Disappearance of Dunya Ahmed. And the big joke running through it is that Dunya means like, it's like mankind, the world, but people call her Dunya, which means cilantro. So like the whole joke is people just keep calling her cilantro, and she's like, fine, that's not my name.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Read it. You read it.
I read it. I read it like a million times.
Read this book. It is so good. I just
thank you.
Cannot stop thinking about it. And we are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.